I used to jump off cliffs for a living or ski terrain where the consequences of failure were injury or death. Yet standing up here, I'm about to take the biggest risk of my life, which is talk about something that took me 38 years to figure out, the cause of and solution for PTSD. Now, it's a risk because you haven't heard this information before. In fact, it contradicts what you've heard. So it may upset healthcare practitioners or others in this audience. So why would I take a risk like this? Well, maybe you can relate, because I'm tired of holding back in order to be polite, and also because it matters. Anxiety disorders worldwide are affecting more people every day, including 1 in 3 teenagers. So what we're doing is not working. Even worse, we haven't been given a clear description of what is even causing anxiety disorders in the first place. So who am I? How did I wind up on this stage? I'm not a doctor. I don't have a PhD. I'm a thought leader. A thought leader comes up with new solutions to old problems. And I'm here to say that contrary to what we believe, PTSD is not caused by trauma alone, nor is it a fear injury. Now, these are big statements, but if you're willing to jump off this cliff with me, you might hear something that could affect much needed change. So backing up, during my ski career, I was seemingly the poster child for what to do about fear. I had no idea what the magic was back then, but I was about to find out. After retiring, I studied an Eastern approach to fear for 15 years, and I learned a facilitation tool called voice dialogue, which allowed me to talk to clients' inner voices, namely fear. And it was in this way that I've been able to ask fear now thousands of times, why do you act out in such a weird way? And here's what fear told me. Fear multiplied by resistance equals PTSD. Now, if you notice, there's no trauma mentioned in this equation. And why? Well, to varying degrees, trauma is going to happen no matter what you do, part of everyone's life. Now, some trauma, of course, is worse than others. And certainly the activists on this stage and in the audience have experienced more than their fair share. During my ski career, of course, I chose to put myself in a situation where I got caught in 5 avalanches. I witnessed dozens of my friends getting crippled or killed in the mountains. I personally experienced over 50 near-death experiences. For a lot of people here, though, they had no choice. But bottom line, we all encounter horrible people, lose loved ones, experience natural disasters, and have accidents. And we also all experience fear, more so after trauma, but even without it, fear is with us every moment of every day from birth till death. Now, when I'm talking about fear, am I talking about scared or afraid? No, actually, fear rarely manifests that way. More, it's any sensation of discomfort that we have in our bodies that we're now calling anxiety, which is the new name for fear, even though it's exactly the same thing. Or we call it racing thoughts, stress, uncertainty, and more. And it can even manifest as physical aches and pains. And as for what to do about it, herein lies the problem. When I was in the mountains, I was called fearless. But no one's fearless. Fear flowed through my body like water through a hose all the time. And it's the perfect design, helping us deal with difficult situations in an intuitive fight or flee way. Yet, thanks to something that I call fear shaming, we've lost our ability to be in flow with this perfect design. Fear shaming starts in childhood. The first time mom says, with love, there's nothing to be afraid of, it begins, the madness begins, because that is not true. But right away, we start to question our emotions, our own mind, and our intuition. The experts weigh in next. We're taught that fear isn't real, but it is. We're taught to let it go, but we can't, not for more than a moment or a day. We're taught that emotional intelligence is our ability to understand and manage our emotions, but we may as well be trying to understand or manage the universe. Until today, back to our equation, trauma happens, fear is supposed to flow, but what's not natural, though, thanks to fear shaming, is instead of fear helping us fight or flee situations the way nature intended, we are now fighting or fleeing the fear itself. Yet run, run, we cannot hide. Fight, fight, we cannot win. At best, all we can do is kink the hose. And this stops the flow of fear. And it buys us a moment of relief, so we think, success, I did it. But that fear, it's not gone. Now it's just stuck in our bodies where it builds up and starts to flood into maybe perhaps our chest or our throat, or for other people, their thoughts, their mind. And in that closed system, it starts to recirculate round and round, showing up as an exaggerated version of itself and keeping us on high alert all the time. Now, here's the biggest shock of all. Really brace yourself for this one. Anxiety treatments are actually more resistance. So it's easy to see that an alcoholic runs away from fear by turning towards alcohol, but it's harder to see that the yogi also runs away from fear by choosing gratitude practice or trying to replace the fear with calm or trying to let it go. And even treatments such as cognitive behavioral therapy, where we use our minds to rationalize away fear, these are yet more resistance tactics. And they work, otherwise they wouldn't be taught. But I've talked to fear about this, and it looks like these are ways for us to deal with fear, but really these are ways for us to not deal with fear. And what it does is it puts us in a day after day, ongoing, sometimes lifelong resistance war against fear that takes over our personalities. Now, I used to resist fear too. 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion different ways to do this. And my technique was that I would ignore it. And when dealing with as much fear, or not dealing with as much fear as I was during my ski career, this proved exhausting. And so the consequence of me ignoring fear was I burned out. There are other ways, 8 billion other consequences for resisting fear. And for somebody else, maybe that trapped fear will flood into their minds, and they start retelling the same story of their trauma over and over. Someone else, when their guard is dropped, the fear will wake them up in the middle of the night. Or another person, it will build up until it explodes out the cracks in the form of a panic attack. So what's the solution? Well, we got to unkink the hose. It's not going to happen with more resistance, but rather the opposite of resistance, which is intimacy. Now, no one either resists fear 100% or has intimacy with fear 100%, myself included. It's more somewhere in the middle. The part of me that did it right, that intimacy took me into a high-performance brainwave state called flow, where I was Batman and fear was Robin, and we were magnificent together. Now, this equation captures the magic that helped me be the best in the world at my very dangerous and difficult sport for 12 years. It's also the solution for PTSD. Now, we've all experienced intimacy with something, and you know it when you feel it. PTSD support groups will tend to give sufferers a puppy or take them surfing, and while that may give them intimacy with those things, it does not teach them intimacy with their fear. MDMA therapy does. It's called ecstasy for a reason. With it, for 8 hours, we can connect with our fear in an ecstatic, intimate way. It's amazing. Yet, The next day, we're back in a fear-shaming world, so will it stick? Here's what will make it stick. I propose 3 language changers. First, because it's our resistance to fear that is so stressful, can we call it post-traumatic resistance disorder instead? And notice how that dramatically changes how we view this disorder and helps us be more real, raw, and honest about what it is. Second, anxiety disorders are currently called mental health issues, but there's nothing wrong with our minds. Merely by kicking the hose, the fear is flooded into our minds. So if we back up, and instead of looking at this from the top down, we view it from the bottom up, let's call these instead emotional health issues. Notice that also changes our perspective. Third, to reverse fear shaming, the next time we say to each other, I feel afraid, that should be met with only, yeah, me too, and nothing more. The last thing I want to say is that intimacy with fear can be taught, can be trained. So close your eyes. Find any sensation of discomfort that you have in your body, even if it's physical aches and pains, and ask yourself, what is my relationship with this discomfort? Am I in resistance to it? If yes, notice that that can be the worst feeling in the world. It's like resisting gravity. Or today, can you connect with it instead? This is done without thought, no goals, just experience it, merge with it, feel it like lovers in a dance. Can you also connect with fear's fight energy, which is called anger? Anger burns hot and fast in order to right a wrong. And with it, when you're in flow with it, nobody gets punched. All you feel is certain, confident, and fierce. And then there's sadness. Sadness breaks open our hearts for love and compassion for ourselves and for other people who have gone through similar trauma. Learn how to be in flow with all these emotions, and that also brings up amazing questions that we can ask ourselves, like what really matters to me, and how can I be an advocate for change? And with this, open your eyes. I bow to you. The fear in me recognizes the fear in you, and together we are one.